What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of the Beginner to Advanced Guide to Brawlhalla. Today we're going to be talking about a really important topic. We're talking about adapting to opponents during your match. Now, one thing I see a lot of players who are in lower elo, especially around gold or high silver, they say that from opponent to opponent, they can have these huge discrepancies in the results of their match. They can say, I played this guy at 1450, it was an easy 3-stock. The next guy I played was 1380 and he crushed me. I don't understand how this can happen. And the biggest reason is that if that's happening to you, is that you're not adapting to what the opponent's doing. What works against one player will not work against all players. So, how do you adapt to an opponent mid-match? The first thing that you really want to do is, especially on your first stock, is try and identify patterns that this other person is playing with. So a few main things to look for. One, what do they do when they jump? How often do they jump? A lot of floaty players like to jump in to engage, and a very common thing is a player will jump at you once, trying to bait an attack, jumping in the air as a defensive option immediately after, and then trying to side air or down air you. That's something to look out for. Anti-air moves can counter this, or if you wait for them for that second jump and them to come in, if that's what they're doing, or if they're just using one jump, take note of that, and you can spot dodge the side air and then punish accordingly. 2, do they like to dash? Do they dash aggressively at you? If you can stuff out their dashes with longer range, that's a good option. So, for example, if they're playing Katars, and they like to dash in and downlight or sidelight you, or a sword who likes to dash in and sidelight you, but you have the spear, you can just stand still and neutral light them. That will beat their option every time. Eventually, what you'll do then is you'll condition them to know that they can't do that approach to you. They'll try and go up in the air, and that's when you can anti-air them. So you can downlight them with the spear, or if you were Queen Nai, you could neutral sig. And conditioning in these mind games is something we'll get into in some more in these future videos, but I want to make sure you guys are familiar with these ideas. But we're talking about range if they dash in. But what if you don't have longer range? Then that gets a little tougher. You're going to have to find a new angle of attack. And controlling space and controlling angles with your moves is something we've talked about in video 1, but we're going to talk about that some more now. If you're on the Katars and you're trying to approach somebody from the ground, but say they have the hammer, they can sidelight you, or they have the blasters, they can use any grounded move to beat you out. What do you need to do? Approaching from the ground's not working. You're going to have to jump in. You're going to have to try and use neutral airs, down airs, but if doing the same thing over and over again isn't working, don't continue to try and do it. And I know that sounds so stupid to say, but at the same time, it's something you see a lot of in silver and gold. Players get used to doing one thing because it works against most opponents, but against the opponents where it doesn't work, they just get crushed, they fall apart. So that's something that you really have to keep in mind. But so we've talked about jumping, we've talked about dashing, and what about approaching? When you approach someone, what do they do? Do they like to throw out an attack to try and beat you, or do they like to dodge to try and bait you? And if an opponent's stuffing your attacks on approach with an attack of their own, then that goes back to what I just said. Either you're getting outranged, or you're not coming in at the right angle. There's no weapon that either can outrange or can't have an angle of attack on another weapon that's beneficial. So you need to consider how you're approaching these opponents based on what weapon, and in some cases even what signatures that they have. And the other option is if they're dodging you on approaching. If the opponent spot dodges, if they're standing on the ground and you try and say jump and sair them and they spot dodge you every time, you're being way too obvious with your approach. That's the problem. It's not that they're not approaching you, it's not that they're being passive, it's that you are being super, super telegraphed. So how can you fix that? One thing that I like to do in the neutral game is I will use dash to dash towards the opponent, and then I'll just dash back. I'm constantly dashing all around, all over the place, and the reason for that is that when I dash forward, I've conditioned them, and there's that word again, conditioning is very important in fighting games, But when I'm constantly dashing forward and then backwards and forward and backwards and just randomly dashing all the time, they don't see me do a dash forward and immediately go, oh, he's going to attack after spot dodge. If 80% of the time in the match I just don't attack after a forward dodge, they don't expect my forward dodges to lead into attacks. And that's something that you want to be mindful of, and you want to think about not just what's my most effective way to hit my opponent, get damage on them, but what will they not expect? How can I make myself unpredictable? And one more thing I want to talk about here on the topic of paying attention to what the opponent's doing. When they do dodge after you've landed in a hit, pay attention to how they dodge. Like, do they dodge away from you? Do they dodge in towards you? I'm not going to go too detailed on this right now, but a future video in this series will cover learning how to read dodges and how to punish dodges. But for now, that's the first thing I want you guys to be mindful of. When my opponent dodges, where do they go? But, you know, that's, like I said, that's getting into a future video, so let's move ahead here a little bit. And the last thing that I really want you guys to look out for is pay attention to how the opponent looks for kills. Finding kills effectively is something we talked about in video 1. And at lower elo, most players either spam SIGs or try and side air you. So if that's happening, play cautious. Do not aggressively run forward into their side. If the opponent's above you and coming down, don't jump up at them if they have the hammer. They're gonna side air you. Don't go for risky signatures of your own. If you're at 3 stocks red and they're at 2 stocks yellow, don't just try and side sig them for no reason. If you whiff, they're very well going to punish you with a side air or sig of their own and kill you. You need to play a little bit safe. But also look to position yourself in a way that puts the most distance between you and the blast zone. So if you're on the left side of the map, you want to be on the right of your opponent. If you're on King's Pass on the right pillar, you want to be on the left of your opponent. So if they hit you with a side air, you get hit into the leftmost pillar of King's Pass, and you'll wind up in that shenanigan zone and not get knocked out. And that can happen to you even if you have 300 damage on you. There are ways you can intelligently position, so any option that the opponent has with their weapon that would be a kill will just knock you into part of the map and keep you safe. Twilight Grove and King's Pass are the big maps that you can do that on. But, that's kind of sums it up, everything I wanted to say about adapting to opponents. We're going to do it, let's run down a quick overview. Again, on that first stock, try and identify. What are the things you want to look for? Jumping, how do they jump? Are they approaching with jumps? Dashing, how do they like to use their dashes? And what do they do when you approach them? Do they throw an attack or do they dodge? Obviously, most players won't always do the same one, but especially at low elo, most players have an extreme preference where 85% of the time when you jump in and attack them, either they spot dodge or try and attack you back. And if you can identify what the opponent's doing, especially if you're stuck in gold, if you can identify what they're doing and find the appropriate counter to that, you will skyrocket in elo. But not only will it get you out of gold, that's an important fundamental to ingrain for when you're in high plat, in diamond, even tournament level players. This is something you'll hear high level players talk about all the time. Adapt to the opponent. Figure out what it is that they want to do. Like I said in the beginning of this video, you can't play against every person the same. And if you're trying to do that, you're probably going to, unless you're very, 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 very talented in the style that you play, you're probably going to hit a wall at highest gold or low platinum. But I hope this video has been helpful to you guys. And again, this is part 2 of the Beginner to Advanced Guide of Brawlhalla. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.